Hello, this is GamerX20 and welcome to Gaming Memories. Today on Gaming Memories, I'm not going to just do one review, not two, not three, not four, but 5 games published and developed by Namco. So you may be asking, why am I doing 5 random Namco games? Well, let me give you a small, brief history.
Namco played a huge role when Sony's new console was coming out. Being that Namco was the first third-party publisher in theory, of course, they released the first 5 arcade games ported to the PS1. There was a racing game, a flight combat game, a vehicular combat game, a 3D fighting game, and a railroad shooter game. Most of them became classics and well remembered, while others failed and bit the dust. Why these so important? Because the first 5 Namco games featured a person who is staring at you, where their eyes being objects from the game you are all about to play, and feel hypnotic. And also all of them includes a booklet about the wonders of Namco's 32-bit awesomeness that is coming straight out of Japan and coming to America to rule the industry. And finally, all of them were featured on one commercial about these games coming straight from Japan, and even have a Japanese spokesman to talk about it.
参りました。そしてこれがプレイステーションです。ところでちょっと誰か二次元さんのビデオお願い。痛いですね。で、本当はちょっとこれとは違うんだけども、まあ大体こんな感じですね。エアコンバットです。迫力のあるドッグファイトお楽しみください。ヒーンバババババ。おい早く俺を上に投げろスコッティ。あ、彼はもう死んでるよジーム。ダメ。僕は医者だ。レンガ職人じゃないんだ。僕は何を言ってるんだろう。
But for some reason they put Weapon Lord in the commercial, which is strange. Seemingly it was only released for Super NES and Genesis, and not on PlayStation.
Weapon Lord. Combat with a cutting edge.
ウェポンロードはセガジェネシスとスーパーニンテンドー用のゲームソフトです。
Why they did this? I don't know. Namco does whatever they want. Anyways, with all that out of the way, I am unofficially going to name it the Namco I Anthology Series, or T.N.E.A.S for short. Now that we're done about a small history about Namco and Sony, let's get on to the review and see if these games have aged well.
And last but not least, I'm going to give these games a temporary score, because I haven't completed most of the entire games yet. So yeah, let's get started with our first game, and one of the more popular ones since it was a launch title. Ridge Racer.
Released on September 9th, 1995. It's an arcade racing game based on the original arcade game back in December 1st, 1993, and one of the more popular ones since it was a successful launch title in all 3 regions. The graphics are good. Even back in 1994, it still looks alright, even though it's primitive. The music is good. It's filled with a lot of rock/techno/jazzy tunes. The presentation is okay. You have your manual selection for track selections, transmissions, cars, and options. The load times are fast, since it only includes one track in the entire game, more on that later. And lastly, the hub is okay. Do I need to say more? And now the controls. It's alright, but there are vehicles that have their own strengths and weaknesses. But normally I chose car number 3 FA Racing because it has perfect stats. Now here's the big question. Are there additional content? Well, yes. They put a mode where you have to race the track backwards. I know it's not that special, but back in the 90s, most games don't oftenly have a backwards track mode. So seeing this was still new at the time. Also, when you start the game, it goes to a playable version of Galaxian. Oh, and here's a fun fact. If you shoot down all of the enemies before the loading screen is finished, you unlock 8 new cars. However, I am having a hard time being Galaxian due to how you need to hurry up before time runs out. Now that we got to the pros, where are the cons? Well, at first, you have a fun time playing it for a couple of times, but then it gets repetitive due to one thing, and that is, there's only one track. And people might rage about, no, there are 4 tracks, not one, you stupid moron. Well, yes, I know, but the first 2 tracks are the same thing. The only difference is on track 2, the skybox changes to a sunset, and after the sun goes down, it's nighttime. And track 3 and 4 did have a different section to race on, but once again, more of the same. And last is track 4, when it's just a one-on-one race. It's hard at first, but you get used to it. And after you've beaten all 4 tracks, the credits roll. I know there are more things later on in the game like secret cars and stuff, but as of right now, I've seen enough for now and feel satisfied. I would give it a 3 out of 6, but it was a launch title, so I'll give them 1 extra point, because it was a nearly perfect port by Namco. So I give Ridge Racer a 4 out of 6.
Next, we have Air Combat, which came out after the launch for the PlayStation.
Released on September 13th, 1995. It's an arcade flight combat game based off mostly the original arcade game back in December 1st, 1992. And I say mostly, because these two carry the same title, but they're different. Why? We'll get to that in a few minutes. The graphics are kinda bland in most spots, but have a very beautiful color textures on grounds and the planes. The music is alright. It does have some few good catchy tunes. The presentation is good. You have your intro that looks good back in the 90s. When you start a mission, you give a very brief guide what you need to do to take down.
Compromised in the last enemy push. Reports indicate imminent arrival of bombers. Scramble and ace those bogies. Target B-52 Bomber Force.
And the hub looks good. You have your missiles, ammo, the directions you're going, your speed and slow buttons, and also your map GPS. Overall, good. And finally, the controls. It's very hard at first with all the button layouts if it's your first time playing a flight combat game, but you'll get used to it and master it easily. It does have a little bit of stiffness on your plane, but quickly ignored. Now, are there additional content? Yes, and that is the entire game. Why? Well, there are a few things from the original and the console version. In the original arcade version, you had a time limit, and whenever you shoot a target plane, your time extends. In the console version, you have no time limit. Instead, you have your fuel limit, which is sort of identical but different. The arcade, you only have one plane and also difficulty selection. In the console version, you have many different types of planes to choose from, and even have to buy new planes if you had enough points whenever you finished a mission. And last but not least, the arcade version only has one level. One freaking level. Sure, there is a bonus level where you have to take down an ace fighter, but that's it. Nothing else. Unlike the console version, there are more levels and multiple paths to choose from, and also having very distinct variety from one level and the other. Now for the flaws, the only 3 cons I have problems with. Number 1, the wingman. You have the option either you go by yourself or have a helper on your way, and even choose a plane for your wingman. At first, it was kind of a neat feature on paper, but it kind of falls off later, because your wingman does whatever he wants, and never actually helps you at all. So what's the point having this option? It could have been scrapped altogether. Number 2, the voice control. It's not that annoying at first once you start playing it, but then it gets onto your nerves with its repetitive dialogues, and half the time you can't understand what they're saying.
Enemy in sight. Up ahead! Let's return to mission, buddy! Enemy locked on target. Fire! Jesus, hope you on our 6.
And number 3, the planes. Despite having multiple selection of planes to choose from, you only rather play the only plane with perfect stats, rather than playing all of them. And most of them have flaws. Like, they can't move fast enough, or they fly at a terrible speed, or no maneuverability. So, pick your poison. Despite some flaws, I could still see as an improvement over its original arcade counterparts. And it's not a bad start to the series, and I could appreciate it. I still have more things to do in the game, but I'll save that for another time. I give Air Combat a 4 out of 6.
The third one is Sled. And not that many people know about it. Why? Well, let's have a look.
Released on October 18th, 1995. It's an arcade vehicular combat game based on the original arcade game back in December 1st, 1993. This type of genre was way ahead its time before Twisted Metal was created. The graphics is great, except for the frame rate. Sometimes it lags to 30 frames and other times it goes 60 frames, but doesn't affect the gameplay. The music is underrated and nobody talks about it. The presentation is alright. You start out choosing a vehicle, or what the game calls it, choose your sleds. Each of them have their own balance and all. I chose Madison Hawk because, you know, perfect stats and all. And after you choose the character, it briefly shows a small cutscene of the opponent that you're about to battle, him or her. The hub is alright. Life meter, shield, and item pickup and all. Nothing else to say but meh. And last, the controls are well responsive. If you know how to master it first. It feels like they did master the controls right straight from the arcade version. Now, are there additional content? Yes, but only two. And that is to change the textures from arcade to home console and new vehicles when you finish this character's story. Yeah, this is kind of a weak content if you ask me. So for the cons are the levels. There are a total of 11 rounds, but for the levels there are only 4 in the entire game. Why couldn't they just add in new levels? Hey, that could be additional content, but no, they didn't do that. And last but not least is no replay value. In my opinion, it's really not that fun to play. The only thing that could have been fixed is the story. There are characters with bios and why they entered the competition, but never fulfilled in the game. And all of the endings are all the same. Well, except for the vehicle you chose. So yeah, it's just a bare bones arcade game straight to home console. I give Sled a 3 out of 6.
The fourth one is a fighting game, and the best 3D fighting game for the time, Tekken.
Released on November 8th, 1995. It's an arcade 3D fighting game based on the original arcade game back in December 11th, 1994. Out of all of them, this is actually the best one. Not from the Tekken series, but from T.N.E.A.S. The graphics is okay for the characters, but the background is good and match the arcade style. The music is great and you feel pumped. The presentation is alright. The intro FMV is kinda creepy and a bit uncanny, but was passable back in '95. The area you fight shows the name of the area. Thanks, I guess. And the hub is good. 2 bars and time limit. And the controls are tight. Even though I'm not good at fighting games, I still have complete control over my character, so I thank Namco for putting effort on the controls. Now, are there additional content? Yes. First, you can unlock boss characters if you beat the game with all 8 fighters, and also a hidden character, Devil Koyuza, which I might pronounce it wrong, which is his alternate form. Second is the option mode. You can change the timer to high or no time limit, changing fight counts, change difficulty, switch the soundtrack from arranged to original to silent, and turn on a mode for after you lose the match and continue, you pick another character. And third is the FMV, which I already told you, but there is also FMV endings, when you finished a game with the character you chose. Unlike the arcade version, which just shows a replay of you beating all the competitors, and that's it. Oh, and one last thing that I forgot. When the game boots up, you play a minute game of Galaga. And you can also play it with 2 players by accessing a cheat code. Now, for the only one con I have to say is the graphics. Or in this case, the character designs. The designs have not aged well over the years. They kinda feel blocky in most areas and overall looks outdated by its sequels. But it still is an enjoyable fighting game and the gameplay is fun to play even if the graphics aged poorly. I give Tekken a 4 out of 6.
And finally, the last one on our list is Starblade Alpha. And like Sled, not that many people know about it.
Released on April 27th, 1996. It's an arcade railroad shooter game based on the original arcade game back in September 1st, 1991. This was the 3rd game to be ported to home consoles. The first one for the Sega CD in November 10th, 1994, and then the second one for the Panasonic 3DO in December 16th, 1995. The graphics are okay, for 50%, while the other 50% is just FMV. That's all I gotta say about it. The music is okay, if there was any while playing the game.
Located enemy flagship commanders. Pursue and engage. Making a quick turn.
It only plays on the cutscenes and that's all.
The enemy task force mechanized planet Red Eye just reached the Federation of Planets and is approaching our mother planet. Our strategy is to neutralize Red Eye and defeat the menace to our mother planet. Aim at the power source generator of Red Eye. All energy converges on the Power Stone, which is inside of Octopus. Good luck, Geosword.
The presentation is alright, but I have nothing else to say about it. It's just meh. And for the controls, just button arrows and X button. That's all you need. And no, it's not compatible with the Namco Guncom or the Konami Justifier. Now, are there any additional content? Well, yeah, but it's only to change the graphics to arranged to original. And that's it. That's even more lazier than Sled. And even Sled at least put in more vehicles. But for Starblade Alpha, it's just changing graphics. And nothing else. Out of all of them, this has got to be the laziest job. And did not put in more effort on the game. And for the con, and really this is a big one, is that it's just too boring and dull. It feels like they didn't put effort on the game at all. I know they featured the arcade version as an additional, but that's not saying much. And there's only 3 levels in the entire game. And all of them are just dull and generic. Even with the arranged graphics, it's still not fun to look at. If this game made console ports back in 91 or 92, I could understand. But this was released in early 96, 5 years after the original arcade game. And it was released for the PlayStation, which was a powerhouse system. So seeing this on the system feels like a lackluster port that should have been on it at all in the first place. It could have made some improvements, like adding music, new levels, or brand new cutscenes. Sure, it will still be boring, but at least Namco could have tried to fix some problems. But no, it's just another bare-bones arcade game with the only additional to change the graphics to arrange to arcade, which is neat, but not enough to save this game, making it the least favorite out of the T.N.E.A.S. I give Starblade Alpha a 2 out of 6.
And that is the Namco Retrospective series. Now, what are my final thoughts? Well, most of them didn't age well. The controllers are good for most of the games, and finally the graphics, even though they're primitive, actually feel like it was ported from the arcades. Now back in the 3rd and 4th generation, whenever they bring in a home port from the arcades, it was butchered down due to cartridge limitation or did not have enough power back then. But seeing an arcade game straight to home console was a near arcade port to some of these games and finally exceed expectation from gamers alike. Anyways, after that, Ridge Racer, Air Combat now changed to Ace Combat, and Tekken would later get sequels, make some improvements along the way, and be much better from their original counterparts. But as for Cyber Sled and Starblade Alpha, they never got sequels and became obscure and forgotten.
Actually, I take it back. Cyber Sled did got a sequel, Cyber Commando, in 1994, but was in arcades only and never left in Japan. And at one point, Starblade did had a sequel, Starblade Operation Blue Planet, was in development in 2002, and even shown a prototype and leaked across the internet, but sadly it got cancelled and never made it past field testing. So sorry for the minor mess up. Now back to the review.
Now these days, it's easy to find a copy of Cyber Sled, either eBay, retro stores, or thrift stores. But for Starblade Alpha, it's very expensive to get, going high from $70 to $1,100 on eBay. And it's very rare if you could find the long box that includes the disc and manual, because they don't feature the manual when it's complete. Why? But if you still want to buy it, I suggest getting the import game instead. It's very cheap and costs about $12 on eBay. Or you could just emulate it from your PC if you're too lazy. Anyways, this is GamerX20 and Season 1 is almost coming to a close. So, what's my final review? Well, it's going to be a two-parter, and both of them are racing games that I owned and played them a lot back in my childhood days. One for the PS1 and the other one from the PS2. What are these games I'm talking about? Well, I'm not going to tell you until that day comes. So yeah, just you wait. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the Season 1 finale.